food and food timing specifically, because it's probably the most important part about food and why and when we should eat it. So first of all, when diet is wrong, medicine is of no use. When diet is correct, medicine is of no need. So diet nutrition is a huge part of our health. But as we've talked about in the previous weeks, exercise is important. Timing of exercise is important, and what time you go to sleep, because that sleep has a huge effect on how your body detoxifies. And then when we set our circadian clock. So look at your clock, draw this circle here. If you put an X to the center and a line across, you should end up with kind of a pie with the 6 pieces. Okay, so go ahead and draw that up. And then write what time do you wake up in the morning? What time do you go to bed at night? If there's a little bit of change, just block off like 10:30 or whatever it may be. What time do you eat breakfast, if you eat breakfast? What time do you eat your noon meal? What time do you eat your evening meal? Do you snack? Write down your snack times. Do you kind of snack and graze all day? What time do you exercise? And that may vary a little bit. If you go to a 9:30 yoga class on Tuesday, Thursdays, then of course that's going to be in there, but most of the time you exercise at 7:00 a.m., right? Just mark those down, or if you exercise in the afternoon or evening. These are just nice things to know. So if you go back to the other workshops, you'll be able to see how that plays a part in it. Okay, so the basics of food. Food should be satisfying to the palate. So I believe Jenna said something about food being satisfying, that if you don't like it, you can train yourself to like food eventually. But if you're just starting out on some sort of meal plan or something to be able to have a healthier diet or starting to refine your diet, it's not the most important thing. Timing is by far the most important thing. So first of all, start with eating food that you enjoy, but is on the healthier side of enjoyment. Increase body strength and provide energy. So we want to make sure that our food is actually giving us energy and life. If we're eating food that isn't good for us, it's going to actually draw energy from our body. And for some of us, we may have food allergies, and food allergies can be an issue. Although a lot of times the food allergies are because our lymphatic system isn't working properly, which is kind of ironic considering we don't think of that as being a part of digestion, and it's a huge part of digestion. Maintaining regular functions of the body and the taste of nutrition and nutrients. So in Ayurveda, we look at the taste being more important than the actual vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamin B, and all the minerals. Because if you're getting all the tastes, you're more than likely getting all of the nutrients that you need, and especially with meal timing and meal time of the year, which plays an important part also. So not eating the same thing every single day, but making sure you get in sweet, sour, pungent, astringent, bitter, and salty. And it doesn't mean to overindulge in any of them, but there's certain times of the year when certain tastes are even important. Like we're heading into the fall and winter, so sweet, sour, salty are more important because they actually help to build on our body. And it doesn't necessarily mean gain weight, it means to build vitality for a very dry, cool season. And especially if you live in the northern climate, it gets a little intense. Stimulate the digestive fire and increase vitality and immunity. So we want our digestive fire, we call it Agni in Ayurveda. It means digestive fire, or kind of like metabolism, but it's more specific to how we burn food. We want this to increase to be able to, not increase to the point of beyond, because then it causes other health issues, but to be at this perfect fire. So imagine a perfect campfire, it's just like that. So we want our digestive system to be just perfect to be able to process harder to digest foods. So that'd be gluten, dairy, and meats. And if it can't digest those things, a lot of the times it's because our digestive system is maybe barely burning or not burning at all. And if this is happening, it could be because our lymphatic system isn't draining things out, which would affect our immune system, since our immune system and our lymphatic system are usually called the same thing, but they meet in the middle. Eating food should be eaten while it's warm or hot, and it should be unctuous, meaning it should be some sort of liquid-y, but there's some leniency on that depending upon the time of year. So we're not huge in Ayurveda on eating a lot of cold, dry, a lot of raw foods, because again, the digestibility is so hard. And if the digestive system is already taxed, it can cause a lot more issues with that. And that's another whole topic. And if you have questions around that, you can ask me later. Suitable portion sizes. So Jenna talked about that. We don't want to overeat our food. When we eat too much food, we actually stretch out our stomach. Like, that's the physical side effect from it. But then we throw off our digestive system's chemicals. And we want those chemicals to be proper. That's why I want to make sure we chew our food well. As soon as food touches our tongue IDs what chemicals and how much need to be brought into our stomach to be able to mix it up and break it down to send it through the rest of our body. Our stomach is not where we digest food. Our stomach is where everything starts to get broke down. Our intestine, our small intestine, is where we start to digest and pull out the nutrients of food. And this is significant because too often we think of what's in our stomach, and we really have to think of what's beyond that. And that's why eating 3 meals a day and no more is really key, unless you have severe health issues. And there would be specifics around that, but there's ways around that too, to keep the meals fairly consistent at the times. Suitable for climate and season. So heading into the drier season, so we're heading into fall, it's obviously the air is super dry now. I've definitely noticed it on my hands. And in the winter, it gets even drier. And so what we tend to unnaturally crave will be stuff that's pungent, astringent, bitter, or dry, crunchy, and cold. And that means you're really out of balance. So when we look at fall, we want to look at the foods that help to bring liquid into our body, that help bring lubrication into our body. So this is the time of year we want to increase our fats and take in more fats to be able to oilate on the inside so that it goes out through our skin to be able to keep our skin healthy and beautiful. And this is a lot of times the time of year for those of us that practice and maybe just don't do it as much in the summertime, is when we start doing more oil on our skin to be able to keep our skin soft and lovely during the wintertime versus dried and cracked. And there's a lot of practices around that too, because if we put lotion on our skin, a lot of times the lotions that we use have chemicals in them that are very, very, very bad for us. There's only, I know of maybe 1 or 2 companies that are clean enough that I would maybe put them on my skin. But why would I put them on my skin when I can put oil on my skin? It's so much more beneficial. So think of nutrients as not just what you put in your body, but what do you put on your body, because our skin is our largest organ of our body and it absorbs everything. So take that in consideration when you put stuff on your skin. Suitable time of day. So the time of day is key. We will talk about this one now. So breakfast in the morning should be before 9 o'clock. So that depends on what time you exercise, because our exercise should be done in the morning, ideally to be able to move kapha and to move stagnation out of our body. We should be getting up at 6 a.m. or earlier, unless you're severely ill, or I have recommended, or another practitioner has recommended something for a certain reason. Noon meal should by far be the biggest meal of the day. So you want to think of your breakfast as a primer meal, as an appetizer meal, especially if you're not a big breakfast person. So if you're not a breakfast eater, this is the time of year we want to break the fast. That's why it's called breakfast, break the fast. And what it does is it breaks the fast from the night before. So we want to be able to have a primer meal. So for some of us, we're going to eat a nice big breakfast. I'm a big breakfast eater. It's one of my favorite meals of the day. I'm very hungry in the morning, so it's a necessity. When it gets to be noontime, I'm also very hungry. So that primer meal gets me rocking and rolling, and our body amps up to eat our largest meal in the middle of the day. Okay, so we want to eat the bigger, heavier, harder to digest. That's when you can have maybe a little extra treat with it, because your system can digest harder to digest foods at this time. This would be the time you'd want to eat meat if you eat meat, or again, foods that are a little harder to digest at that time. In the evening, you want to eat your last meal before 6 o'clock p.m. Okay, so 6:30 is okay if you have strong digestion. You start to get any later than that, you're throwing off other systems of your body, and especially your sleep cycle. Because when you eat, your body releases just a little bit of cortisol to be able to amp up to digest the food. And our body naturally digests better here, best here, and then starts to slow down. So the production, I'll talk about the ghrelin and the leptin now, just because it's the appropriate time. So when I'm talking about ghrelin and leptin, so ghrelin, think of Gremlins. Do you guys remember Gremlins? It was a movie back in probably the 80s, 80s, early 90s. And these gremlins would come out and they just get really crazy. Well, think of that when you try to think of these. That's how it helps me remember. So ghrelin is produced in the stomach and it helps to stimulate appetite, and it raises our appetite super sharp right before we eat. Okay. Then after that, it decreases when we're done, and then leptin kicks in, and that's what keeps us sedated, we'll call it. It keeps appetite suppressed. All right. So the idea is to be able to get the ghrelin and then have leptin kick in. After the nighttime, it decreases significantly. So this means it's also harder to digest foods. And instead of digesting the foods and using them as energy, our body stores them as fat. So this is why the meal timing is really important, and consistency is important. So if you tend to eat breakfast between 6 and 10 a.m. or don't eat breakfast at all, and then eat your noon meal anywhere from 11:30 to 2, and then eat your evening meal at 8 p.m. and then sometimes at 5 p.m., your body doesn't know when to release these chemicals and these hormones to be able to tune off your brain or amp up your brain to be able to send signals to the right organs for the right reasons. And there's a lot of complex science behind it that I could explain, but I want to keep things simple and going here. So the importance is that if you don't eat at consistent times, if you're very inconsistent with your eating, you will throw off your digestive system, because our bodies want consistency. They want everything to be as consistent as possible so that it doesn't have to work so hard to be able to maintain it. Because if it's taking all our brain power to be able to run our digestive system and to run our hormones, and because you keep on throwing balls at it, it doesn't know what to do. So think about it that way. Think about how can you get it as simple and as refined as possible. Most of us have somewhat of a consistent schedule, or we have the ability to be able to make that. Meaning, if you work in a workforce, you've got a noon time-ish, and it should be fairly consistent. Hold that consistency as best you can. In the morning, make it a habit of making it the most consistent time. The timing is key. If the timing isn't there, it's really not going to matter what you eat, because there's plenty of research also around intermittent fasting and how weight loss works, that they have people that eat more food in the afternoon and evening, and then they have, especially, this is more specific toward women, actually the research was done on women, or eating breakfast and then starting to fast in the evening, maybe eating a really super light early supper and then going into a long fast. And the people that ate breakfast and a large noon meal, or had their calories, I should say, before 2 o'clock, because it was a Western study, it showed that they lost more weight than the people who ate most of their calories at noon and then after. So really focus on getting more of your calories in the morning, because you have more time to burn it off. If you eat most of your calories at night, you're going to sleep. So you're not going to be burning a whole lot of calories. Plus, our digestive system shuts down at night. Our digestive system is not supposed to be working at, because we want our body to be able to get rid of toxins. So if you watch the sleep lecture, I talked a lot about how our body detoxifies between 10 and 2 a.m. It detoxifies our brain, detoxifies the rest of our body. And if our body doesn't detoxify, it doesn't get another chance till our brain goes to sleep. Well, goes to sleep in a sense of taking in information. It doesn't go to sleep processing that information. So all day long, we're bringing in information, bringing in food, bringing in nutrients. And at night, our body has to get rid of and process it out and cleanse our body. And if that doesn't happen, then there's a whole side effect to that. And weight gain is usually number one, especially for those of us that are either have struggled with weight our whole life, or those of us that are that 40 plus area. We just start to notice things change a little bit. And this is the time to really amp down and get connected with your Ayurvedic clock and to focus on timing of eating. So some things that can weaken the digestive system: mixing healthy and unhealthy foods. So this can mean like eating a really good meal and then eating a bunch of french fries off your significant other's plate or your kid's plate. Okay, that would be eating, you had this healthy meal, this healthy maybe sandwich of some kind or something, and then you ate the french fries that went with it. So mixing unhealthy and healthy food. Overeating or under eating, this is when we take a look at what time is the right time to fast. So I do believe in fasting. I think that there's a benefit to it. I don't think most of us are designed to do a full like week-long fast unless you're supervised or have the right equipment and the desire to do it. There's ways to do it. But what we want to do is we want to fast between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. for sure. So if you eat at 8 a.m., then you get a couple extra hours on there. I sometimes fast from, so I'll eat my breakfast and I'll eat a large noon meal, and then I'll fast until that next morning. And I do that once a week for sure, and maybe even twice a week, because it just makes me feel really, really light in the morning. So if you're going to do any style of intermittent fasting, in fact, my church had a fast. And I told the minister, I'm like, you need to change the fast the next time. He goes, why? And I told him why. I go, because you're actually, you're offering them to skip the noon meal when the digestive system is running the hottest, and you're teaching them to eat later, which is actually going to put weight on them. So if you want to recommend fasting, tell them to fast either breakfast or the noon meal, which I said, don't fast those two meals, to fast through the night. I just said that wrong. So to eat your breakfast and your noon meal and to fast through the night is much more effective. And you'll actually see some weight loss. So when I work with clients on weight loss or weight management, especially, I work with a lot of perimenopausal, menopausal women, because that's my focus. And if I'm going to introduce them to fasting or to weight loss, I say, okay, fast anywhere from 2 to 7 days a week for a couple weeks during this time. Because again, that's the optimal time for your body to purge out stuff, versus in the morning we're building. Morning we're building up, and then we start decreasing and pushing stuff out and through our body. So fasting, I know it's a huge topic nowadays, and I had some questions about it last time, so I want to make sure I touched a little bit on that. Foods that are not local, or too much food that can't be grown in this area. So in Minnesota, we have to kind of take that with a grain of salt, but eat as close to local as you can. So in the summertime, it's really easy to eat local. In the wintertime, you do the best that you can. Eat during the season. So try to keep the foods that would normally be grown in the seasons. And if you don't know, you can ask me, and there's plenty of research around that also, because what happens is those foods naturally feed our bodies in what they need to be able to stay balanced physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually through that season. So a lot of times when I see people having a seasonal depression disorder, I'm like, well, yeah, sure, it's from vitamin D and not getting the sun and not being able to go outside. There is so much more to it. Because a lot of times these people are eating junk food and stuff that's making them light and airy. And this is the time of year we want to be eating really grounding and nourishing and warm foods. So it's a lot of lifestyle change, and that can go away pretty easily, the seasonal stuff. Because again, it's connecting with nature in some way. And I know for some people, winter's a really hard time of year. Don't get me wrong, I do understand that. I'm a winter person, so I'm pretty amped up about it. Poor quality foods. You want to be eating foods that are nutritious, that have nutrient value. Eat foods that are aggressive on the mind. So foods that are too aggravating and activating, especially in the summertime. So eating a lot of hot, spicy foods are not really very good for us. Having some spice, so using some black pepper or some ginger or pipoli, not necessarily a bad thing. A little bit of cayenne on things once in a while, but constantly eating really spicy food will make you more aggressive. It's just, there's just an equal sign there, especially in the summertime and in the fall. And it'll dry you out in the fall. And most of us don't want any more dryness in our body anyway. Too much raw food. So Ayurvedics are not big on raw. We are pretty big on vegetarianism. We think that that's by far the best way to eat, but being raw is not recommended most seasons. So spring, you can eat more raw food. Summer, yes, you can eat some raw food, but in the winter time, especially, no salads. Like, it's the worst time to do it. If you're going to make it, cook it. Let's see, irregular hours. So eating after dark. Once the sun goes down, kitchen closed. So it's a good practice to get into, because right now we're hitting the seasons about right. So the sun's going down behind me. It's getting dark. We want to be able to honor that cycle. This is a time to kind of hunker down and wind down, spend time with family, go for a walk outside, that kind of thing. All right. So I think we got a lot of stuff covered. There's still so much, you guys. Nutrition is a huge topic, and it's a very touchy and sensitive topic. So I would like to open up for some questions if you have any. I